Monday the 10th of March, 10:30 a.m. according to Apple time. I don't know, County Council time's 10:32, so I don't know. I'll take the Apple time. I think that probably works from rugby. Before the meeting, as per usual on a Monday morning, the fire alarms have been tested. So if you hear a fire alarm during the meeting, please exit the building to the rear of me and congregate in the front car park, as per usual, assuming that there is a usual for fire alarms. There is water available at the back of the room, refreshments, and I believe everyone is well trained at this stage in the committee cycles, well trained with regard to dealing with applications and taking things forwards. So simply moving on, item number 1 is apologies replacement members.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Nutman today.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is declarations of members' interests. Would anybody like to declare? Okay, that's very straightforward. Item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of February, previously circulated. I'm quite happy to move them. Councillor Skinner, you're seconding, I assume?
Quite happy to.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll go from there. We'll just get a little bit of lightweight interference off the intercom system, no problem. So all in favour of the minutes, I will sign them during the meeting. Thank you. Anybody wishing to abstain because they weren't here? Thank you, Councillor Reid. No problems. So moving on to traffic items then, 4.1. Jan, 4.1 Lincoln Francis Street, proposed waiting restrictions.
Thank you, Chairman. So this first report today relates to parking issues around the Bracebridge Infant and Nursery School, located at the end of St Francis Street. This is a cul-de-sac with no space for vehicles to drop off children and turn round. Next slide, please. This results in reversing manoeuvres by vehicles back down the street, and the advisory school keep clear markings have been observed to be parked on regularly also. So we've proposed a mandatory school keep clear marking and short section of waiting restrictions as shown in blue on Appendix A. And we've had numerous objections concerned mainly with the potential loss of parking for residents as a result of these proposals. And also, well, our view is that given that the proposed restrictions will only apply Monday to Friday at 8 till 4 and not at weekends, there'll be minimal impact on residents, but the aims of the scheme to improve safety will be achieved. It's therefore recommended that the objections are overruled so that these restrictions may be introduced as advertised. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Obviously, this is the bottom end of Lincoln, Bracebridge, take us out to Newark Road. I've travelled this area frequently. I think I'm supportive of the application, so I'm going to propose the paper as written. Can I have a seconder or anybody alternative? Thank you, Councillor Reid. Would anybody like to speak to the paper? Okay, so I'll put it to the meeting. All in favour, please show. Thank you. I believe that is carried. I will move you to the next one then, which is 4.2 Lincoln Burton Road, proposed bus stop clearway. Jan, please.
Thank you. Lincoln Burton Road, the proposals here include a bus stop clearway outside the Methodist Church and relocation of the existing limited waiting bay near the co-op to improve traffic flow. We've received 2 objections which specifically relate to the bus stop clearway. And the potential impact on the reduced number of parking spaces in the bay, which may impact on businesses, and also the potential impact on visibility coming out of the nearby junctions. Whilst it's acknowledged that 2 parking spaces will be lost here as a result of this proposal, Burton Road is well served by parking restrictions along its length, but currently vehicles parked in this bay mean that buses cannot pull up to the curb to allow passengers to alight the bus or get off the bus safely, and the bus generally has to wait in the carriageway, which impacts on traffic flow and on the impacts the visibility of nearby junctions. The relocation of the bus stop, as suggested by some objectors, has been considered, but would result in the loss of more parking bays. At this location, we've been able to utilise some existing double yellow lines extending into those to mitigate the impact on the parking bay. So the aim of this clearway is to improve safety and access for users of the very regular bus service along here, and it's recommended in the report that the objections are overruled so that we can introduce these restrictions as advertised. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Again, Burton Road, an area known to me. I'm very pleased that you've identified the co-op store on the plan on page 35, because it does give people, you drive along Burton Road and you do count streets as you go up and down, but it's nice to have something where people can identify a site. But I do know people on Grey Street, curious enough, but I'm very pleased with the recommendation and can support it, so I will move it. Councillor Murray, please.
Can you just clarify, John, there's only 2 spaces will be lost, parking spaces?
I suppose it depends on the size of vehicle, but 2 large vehicle spaces would be lost, yeah.
Well, this is a wee bit controversial, Chairman, but I will second it.
That's very much appreciated. Do we have any other speakers? Okay, proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. Okay, next one is Lincoln Lawton Way, which is top end of Lincoln on the Ermine. 4.3, please.
Thank you. So this is another school issue. Concerns have been raised regarding the impact of on-street parking on traffic flow and pedestrian safety. There's a school safety zone here currently, but it's disregarded generally. Parking takes place within it. So we've proposed 2 school keep clear mandatory markings, as shown on Appendix A, and double yellow lines. So we've had 5 objections, mainly around loss of available on-street parking for residents and potential further displacement of parking into the surrounding streets, which already get congested at school start and finish times. The aim of this scheme is to deter parking by introducing enforceable restrictions and reduce delay to traffic flow and improve pedestrian safety. On-street parking will be available to residents within the mandatory school keep clear markings outside the short periods when they apply. It's therefore recommended that the objections are overruled so that we can introduce the scheme as advertised. Thank you.
Thank you. As some people might or might not know, Lawton Way is, if you like, the internal artery of this large housing estate at the top of Lincoln. An awful lot of traffic goes up and down it. I believe it is, well, as we know, it's the bus route, so I am quite happy to support the application as it stands. Do I have somebody, Vice Chairman?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second this application. I note from the report that the school safety zone is currently in place, but it's unenforceable. And I note that there's been 3 reported injury actions. So in my view, this is very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you for those technical items. So that's much appreciated. Anybody else wishing to speak to the application? Councillor Ashton.
Just really to echo those comments, as I have said in debate in this meeting, in many others, it's absolutely important if we're to have have school safety zones that they need to be enforceable. Otherwise, they don't have the teeth that they need. And in many circumstances, you get people complaining that people are parking where, as well we know, without that traffic regulation order, there's no backup to ensure that they can't park there. So fully endorse this and hope to see many more of them.
Thank you. So proposed and seconded. Nobody else wishing to speak. All in favour, please show now. Unanimous. Thank you very much. 4.4 then, Montbilly Marsh, A157 Strawberry Road, 30 mile an hour limit. Jan, please.
Thank you. So the section of Strawberry Road under consideration is currently subject to the national speed limit. There's little development along it, so it's been assessed against the policy criteria for a rural speed limit and has met those criteria. So a speed limit may be justified along the length shown in blue on Appendix A. As usual, the level of limit we introduce is determined by the mean speed of traffic, which in this case was 34 miles per hour. This means that it may be considered as a borderline case, 30 mile an hour limit, and the committee may therefore recommend approval for a 30 mile an hour speed limit as shown for the extent shown in blue in Appendix A. Thank you.
I will open to committee. Councillor Sear, please.
Thank you, Chair. I quite, it's like a icing on the cake. We've been asked for quite a while, and suddenly something going to happen. And I think it is danger if you can support it. If, you know, it not look it, but it are. The resident and the Parish Council been on and on for a long time, and Jen know that. And so I hope you can support this. And so it's my area. I go around, say every time I got email, I got to go, and finally something going to happen. I hope you can support it. It's a rural area, and you don't think you need it, but people are speed it up. So thank you.
Are you moving the paper or you're going to move it? Right, okay, so you are moving it, thank you. Right, okay, do I have any other speakers? I mean, I do know the road, it's one of the main arteries going through to the coast again. I'm quite happy to second it. I will give an option for speakers though. Okay, proposed and seconded, all in favour, please show. Unanimous, thank you very much. And finally, 4.5, Sutton-on-Sea, Broadway and York Road. Jan, please.
Thank you. So in conjunction with resurfacing works programmed in these streets, the opportunity has been taken to re-evaluate the rating restrictions in the area to maximise on-street parking and improve safety at junctions. So currently, limited waiting provision here applies during the summer months only. However, the new colonnade facility under construction currently is anticipated to attract visitors all year round. So part of the proposal is to extend the availability of the limited waiting bays to a year-round provision and not just during the summer months. We've received 14 objections and a petition, many requesting that the 1 hour limited waiting time period that applies to these bays is extended to 2 hours to give more dwell time, particularly given the new amenities that will be in the area, hopefully by the summer. Concerns have also been raised by some residents at the loss of parking throughout the winter should these bays not be available, should be enforceable throughout the winter. So demand for 2 hour limited waiting is acknowledged, and it's therefore recommended that a minor modification is approved to these proposals for this change to be applied to the order. In terms of removing the seasonal nature of the limit, it's officers' view that this should be revoked to support visitors to the area throughout the year, and residents can still benefit from the seasonal nature of the single yellow lines in the area, which will not be enforced between October and April. So the proposals will increase dwell time for visitors to this area throughout the year and encourage a turnover of parking availability. It's therefore recommended that the proposals as advertised are introduced along with the minor modification discussed previously for an extension to 2 hours rather than 1 hour limited waiting period. Thank you.
Councillor Sear, please.
Oh, thank you. I know Sutton-on-Sea, not mine, but they are past Babesop, a Sutton-on-Sea Town Council, and they discuss and talk about it, and we were have a meeting Skegness and Babesop Transport about this issue. some town council want 3-hour parking, and I thought 3 hours in Sutton-on-Sea. What you do in 3 hours? In not Mother Hall, you cannot shop there. So if we meet between 1 or 2 hours, I think should support it is because when Colonnade finish, they will need some more parking. So I think, they need 2 hours for the residents where we got not many parking in Sutton-on-Sea. So I hope you will support this. I know it's not my part, but yes, please. I'm in favor for 2 hours, no more. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, some 60 years ago, my grandfather used to live on York Road, but there hasn't been a lot of changes to York Road.
You better declare an interest then.
No, I don't. I thought perhaps not. It was beyond that, and it's good to listen to what Gianna said in the consideration for the residents in the area, and I've listened carefully, and I'm quite happy to support and second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you. I'm happy to support what's been proposed. I just wonder about the other point about the seasonal nature that was raised. If you've already got seasonal nature on the yellow lines, why not have seasonal regulations on the other part as well? Do it all together. Thank you.
And when you say the other part, do you mean where we've changed it to a year round? I think it's because it's anticipated that the colonnade will be a year-round facility, and it will attract visitors throughout the winter as well. So by keeping these restrictions throughout the year, that keeps that continuity of parking and turnover of parking, gives people the opportunity to park for 2 hours at all times.
I see. Thank you.
I think there does need to be a level of consistency there, and certainly I think that to try and put a restriction on that could be seasonal, I think would be an awkward thing to police as well at this location. So I think there'll be some difficulties. Anyway, proposed and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Anybody against? So that concludes the traffic items. But before you go, Jan, I'm just aware that I'm going to take 5-10 seconds. I'm just aware that this is going to be the last committee meeting of the cycle. So I'd just like to say, and I'd like it minuting, thank you for the excellent reports you've brought and the presentations that you've brought to the committee. And I know that you are, if you like, the public face, and I know there's a lot of officers behind the scenes that are working these papers up. So it's just a quick thank you for me, just to you guys, for the effort you've done. And on the basis of that, we will therefore move on to item 5 and 5.1, and we'll go and see how Neil can do this morning. So before we actually touch 5.1, I just want to comment with regard to 5.3. An application 5.3 has been withdrawn this morning, so I'll just get you all warmed up to that idea. We'll touch on that when we get to 5.3, but rewind you back to 5.1 and Mr McBride.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. Yeah, first item in relation to planning papers takes us to Grateford, and planning permission is sought by Dr. Charles Lane to vary condition 13 of an existing planning permission, which allows the mineral development to commence, but restricting the exploration of any materials or any minerals from the site until works have been carried out to widen King Street at Grateford. So planning permission was granted on the 7th of July 2022 to extract and process sand and gravel and to progressively restore the site to a mixture of agricultural land, nature conservation and an agricultural water reservoir at land off King Street at Grateford. The committee may recall that there was a site visit to this site prior to the planning permission being granted, so councillors may be still familiar with the site and the surrounding. But I'll go to the presentation just to remind the councillors what's involved in this particular application. Okay, thank you. So just as a sort of bring you back to this application, so you may recall that it's adjacent to King Street, to the east of Greatford and west of Baston. Obviously the area outlined in red is where the application site is. You'll see King Street running down the middle of the plan, or on the sort of side of the plan, and you'll see there the area in green is the area which is proposed for the improvements to King Street to be undertaken, and also the proposed access to the site, which is shown right at the southern part of the site on King Street. Next slide, please. Just a closer slide to show the land that's covered by the application site in red. Next slide, please. And again, just as a sort of sort of bring back to your memories in terms of what was proposed. So the proposal was is to extract sand and gravel, and that slide just shows the different phases for that extraction to take place. Next slide, please. And this is the proposed restoration to the site. Next slide. Again, showing the area which is covered by this application and its proximity to the sort of other locations in this area, and again just shows where King Street is, and you can see Baston at the top end of that slide, and Greatford to the west. Next slide, please. And there's finally some photographs just to show you, remind you what King Street looks like. Next slide, please. This slide was taken relatively recently and shows that there has been some highway improvement works to King Street, which has taken place in the last few months. And the final slide just shows the current state of the application site, which is currently used for arable production. So if I can just bring you back to the report, you'll see that what's proposed in the application is that effectively the application seeks to vary the wording of an existing condition which is attached to the planning permission. So condition 13 currently requires that the site access point and the improvements to King Street are undertaken prior to any mineral being removed from the site. The applicant has, as you'll see in the report, set out that they don't consider that they'll be able to complete the improvements to King Street and to construct the access before the planning permission expires on the 7th of July this year. The sort of, in terms of implementing planning permissions, there are various tests that need to be done to say whether the planning permission has been implemented or not. And for mineral extraction, this is very specific in legislation, which requires that the winning and working of minerals has to take place before the planning permission is deemed to have been implemented, which is different to other forms of development. However, that means that to ensure that the development is implemented in the time permitted by the planning permission. The applicant would need to construct the access point and also do the improvements to King Street as the condition is currently worded. So what the application is before the committee today is to seek to amend the planning condition so that the actual mineral extraction in terms of the winning and workings of minerals can take place prior to the improvements to King Street and the access being constructed are undertaken. So there's no suggestion that those improvements wouldn't be undertaken and the access obviously constructed to the required standard, but what the applicant is seeking is the wording is changed so that those improvements don't have to be undertaken prior to the winning and working of a mineral, so they can be done once those minerals have been effectively, once the planning permission has been effectively implemented by the winning and working of the mineral, and then those improvements would be undertaken at a later date prior to the removal of any mineral off the site. So the recommendation on page 71 is that planning permission be granted subject to the 45 planning conditions that are set out in the report. Hope that's clear, Chairman. I know this is a sort of a technical issue, but hopefully that provides the necessary background. I think just before I pass over to the debate, I should obviously draw the committee's attention to the results of consultation and publicity that were undertaken, and they are set out in the report on page 63, and you'll see that there is quite a lot of opposition from the various parish councils in the area, and also in respect of the notification and publicity that was undertaken. So you'll see at the bottom of page 66 that the local district councillor has objected, and I believe that she will speak to the committee shortly, together with further representations that we have received, which are set out on page 67. I would just say that when the consultation was originally undertaken, there was some misunderstanding around what was proposed, and following discussions between the planning officer and the applicant, there was some amendments made, and then a further round of consultation was undertaken to make it clear that no mineral can be removed from the site until the access has been constructed and the improvements to King Street have been completed. So with that, Chairman, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. I'm now going to open to speakers, and I've got Councillor Vanessa Smith, followed by the applicant, Councillor Mr Oliver Laidler, and I believe we might have Councillor Ashley Baxter also wishing to speak in relation to this application. Now, I'm of the opinion that each of these speakers should be afforded 3 minutes, and I don't know if Councillor Baxter is speaking as a county councillor, in which case it would then be 3 minutes for Councillor Vanessa Smith and 3 minutes for Councillor Ashley Baxter. So just for clarity. So we'll start first of all with Councillor Vanessa Smith.
Thank you, officers and committee members. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I'm a local resident and district councillor. Firstly, the geography. Bourne is to the north, where hundreds of houses are being built. The employment centre is Peterborough to the south. Commuters use King Street as a rat run. Secondly, all HGV traffic will be entering and exiting the site via West Deeping to the south. However, road widening to 6 metres to allow the passing of HGVs has only been deemed necessary for the first mile from the quarry entrance, not the full 2 miles along King Street to West Deeping. I believe that this is a dangerous oversight. This committee determined the application 3.5 years ago. As the Section 106 legal agreement was not finalised until the following July, planning approval expires this July. Despite having adequate time to commence this application, the applicant has not done so, and they are running out of time. As the 3-year condition cannot be changed, the only way to prevent this planning consent from lapsing is to alter how the trigger point is reached. I've always had grave concerns about the road safety implications of these plans. The road impact assessment was based upon a traffic survey in April 2019, around the time of the Easter bank holiday weekend. Accident data which accompanied the application was incomplete. King Street is dangerous. In just the past 6 months, there have been 4 serious accidents on this stretch of road with emergency services in attendance. One driver sustained a fractured neck. I keep traffic bollards in my front garden as accidents are so frequent. I acknowledge that allowing work to start before widening King Street will not change the number of gravel lorries on the road if the aggregate cannot be moved off site before the road widening is done. However, many local residents simply do not believe this will be the case. They worry that conditions will be further varied to negate road widening completely. Many residents have lost faith in the planning process and see this as a callous attempt by the applicant to manipulate the system with little regard for local concern. Now is your chance to really stand up for residents and uphold the planning decision that you made. Do not be pushed into approving this. To vary this condition would not only further erode public's faith in local authority, but it's dangerous. These plans are already dangerous, with only half the access route receiving the necessary road widening. Traffic data is from a holiday period in 2019, allowing the applicant to commence work, but then not actually work the site would mean that by the time the site is quarried, perhaps years later, plans will have been based on data which will be decades out of date with no account for population growth. The
Thank you.
risk to the 7-year
I'm
gravel
going to
supply is
stop.
overstated, and if this site is
Councillor
enacted,
Smith, I'm
it
going
will.
to halt you because you've had 3 minutes plus now, so
Okay,
I'm just
please,
going to halt
can
you.
I please reject this application, stand up for residents, road safety and common sense?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go to Councillor Ashley Baxter now. I don't know if he's online. Sorry.
Yes, I am, Chair. Thank you.
Ashley.
Great. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak to your committee. First of all, Gretford, not Greatford, Gretford. When officers and members say these villages wrong, and I know we've got a lot of villages to learn, it does give people the impression that we don't know where they are and we're not in touch with the local community. However, there's a reason why I've come this morning. It's because residents and parish councils have made it abundantly clear that they are against this, as Councillor Smith said, manipulation of the system in order to fulfil the criteria that is needed to be met to run the application. Either we need the minerals or not. If you've got permission for a site and the county council say start within 3 years, then you need to start within 3 years. And the road is, as Councillor Smith says, no less dangerous now than it was in 2019. If anything, the committee and the council should be asking for a review of current traffic data, which takes into account the new quarry traffic. Our villages in my division are surrounded by quarries, ex-quarries and forthcoming quarries, and there are battles against quarries in Baston and West Deeping and everywhere else. And the fact that nothing's happened at this quarry or this proposed quarry shows that we are being done to. It's a cynical attempt by the landowner who is not even from Lincolnshire. I don't think he even lives in England, to manipulate the system to maintain the cost of his land, the value of his land. Only recently he's asked to form and to fulfil one of the other obligations, which is to set up a local committee. And he's been very awkward about that, to be quite frank. He's tried to limit the number of people that have been on it. He's tried to limit the number of times it meets. It's tried to limit the number of parish councillors that are representative on it. He's not interested in the community, let alone the road safety or the health of local residents. And this is an opportunity to push back against this cynical developer and say, no, we establish the rules and the order for a reason. The order is that you do the road first and the quarrying second. To do the quarrying without a road is bonkers. And how, by the way, how are you going to create an access without using the road, without using traffic, without using heavy machinery, without using heavy goods vehicles? Push this back, please, for the sake of residents that are in my division, and also for the integrity of the planning system. This needs to be rejected, and if they want to make another planning application for the quarry, let them go back to square one, because they clearly are not interested enough to do the work that is required to make the place safe.
Thank you for your comments. You've gone a little bit over 3 minutes, but no problems. Okay, so I'll therefore go to the applicant next as speaker, Oliver Laidler.
Good morning all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. My name's Oliver Laidler of Land and Mineral Management, and I'm here on behalf of the landowner and applicant Dr. Lane. The application seeks a very simple amendment to a single condition, namely to alter the wording of condition 13 to allow mineral extraction to commence prior to the widening of King Street and allow the planning permission to be implemented while simultaneously prohibiting the export of mineral prior to the required road widening taking place. This means there will be no export of mineral or additional HGV traffic associated with the quarry until King Street has been widened as required. There's therefore no quantifiable impact from this proposed amendment, and LCC's own highway authority has concluded in their consultation response there will be no impact on the highway. The amendment is required as the timeframe for the agreements and works required to widen the road far exceed the window remaining to implement the planning permission. Should the planning permission expire before it can be implemented, the Lincolnshire Land Bank loses around 3 million tonnes of sand and gravel and falls below the levels required by national planning policy. Any accusations of playing the system, maliciousness and cynicism are entirely baseless. In summary, the proposal does not have any impact and is required to secure the permission and Lincolnshire's land bank. There is no planning reason to refuse the application, and I ask that the amendment is approved in line with your office's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr McBride, any comments from the three previous speakers?
Not at this time, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'll therefore open to committee. Councillor Reid, followed by Councillor Ashton.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, apart from the fact there was a site visit that most of us attended, I was, as a neighbouring division, contacted by several parish councils, and I remember quite vividly their objections. I also remember us seeing slide photographs whereby which 2 lorries to pass on this section of the road was virtually impossible, with two lorries having to turn in their wing mirrors to be able to pass each other. And I don't think other members of the committee will have forgotten that either. As to regards to the locality of it being Gretford or Grateford, I come from, when I went to school, I went to Southwellminster Grammar School. A lot of people in Nottinghamshire call it Southwell. But these things are debatable. But whichever way you look upon it, Gretford or Grateford, and it's not just those. Councillor Baxter did also mention other neighbouring villages that are also affected by the flow of this. My mind is certainly behind not extending any time. This road needs to be widened before anything else happens. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll move to my next speaker, which is Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Planning conditions are imposed out of necessity in order to make an application acceptable. At the point at which the permission was granted, it was clearly deemed that a pre-commencement condition was essential in order to make this application acceptable. Else our esteemed officers wouldn't have included it, and we wouldn't have supported it. The fact that we are very nearly 3 years later and that permission has not been implemented is not our problem. As we have heard from Councillor Baxter, should this permission lapse, the applicant has every right to submit another application. It's simply part of the process. It is why we impose a 3-year limit in the first place. It's to encourage development for which we have granted permission to come forward in a timely fashion. And if that has not come forward in a timely enough fashion in order to meet the requirements of this pre-commencement decision, then I don't see what has changed in the last 3 years for us to turn around and say, well, actually, it doesn't need to be pre-commencement. It can be pre-commencement and a little bit. So, Mr. Chairman, I am minded to move this for refusal on the grounds that the condition was imposed with all good reason, and that I have yet to see any evidence that convinces me that it is not required. The only reason that we have that it is not required is that it would be inconvenient to the applicant to see their existing permission, for which they have had 3 years to implement, expire because they haven't implemented it or done the work necessary for this commission, for this condition to be met, and that work to start.
Thank you for your comments. I do have several speakers, and I do note you were minded. You didn't make a proposal then.
I move for refusal.
Make a proposal there. Thank you. Just dealing with the clarity. So I'm now going to Councillor Overton, Mrs. Overton.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm very happy to second that proposal. The issue that has been suggested is that they're not actually going to remove any material. So the theory is that they're not using the road because no material's coming out, and therefore you can lift this condition. However, as we read on page 65, it talks there about if you were going to do work on this area, you're going to have to take machinery in to create whatever's necessary to do some work. And therefore there are some HGV movements expected, and we have not got a measure of how many. I would have asked if we'd had questions, but it does mean that there is certainly, you can't start this process without some HGV activity, and therefore those road works remain vital that they're done in advance. So I think I'm happily to support the recommendations, and if they, as I said, we've had 3 years, if they've not done it and it lapses, then they just have to come back and ask again, which is the way the system works. Thank you.
I just sort of accept what Councillor Mrs Overton has said, that obviously there will need to be some HGV movements to bring the machinery that would be necessary to extract the sand and gravel. That has been discussed with highways officers, and they were satisfied that the modest amount of movements that would be necessary to do that could be accommodated on the local highway network without any any improvements to the highway network in terms of King Street or elsewhere. So it is to say that that point has been considered by highway officers.
Okay, so I'm going to move to Councillor Carrington next, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I have to say that I agree completely with the previous speakers. I vividly remember the site visit that we made on this application. And I remember standing on King Street, we were all looking behind us to make sure we didn't get knocked down by anything, standing in the middle of King Street, and I asked that one of our officers, a highways officer, who was with us accompanying the trip, about 2 HGVs passing. And the reason I put the question was because I had a very similar situation in my own division, which is many miles away from this site. And it was out of that that measurements were taken and research was done, which clearly established that two HGVs could not pass because of the wing mirrors sticking out. Basically, they'd be running into each other. And the condition was imposed. That was quite a while ago now. There is absolutely no reason that I can see, and none has been offered by the applicant's agent, why the improvements which were required should not have been done. As Councillor Ashton said, we impose conditions to make applications which would otherwise be unacceptable, acceptable. And we impose this condition for that reason. If it was right then, it follows it's right now. I also have concerns about this wonderful world of winning and working, which we are finding ourselves in. The wording of the amended condition as proposed doesn't really limit this to being one thing or another. It limits it to being purely a token extraction or something more substantive. For all we know, there could be very substantial works on there. Material is stored but not exported, but basically the site would start operation. And the scale of the additional traffic, I hear what Mr. McBride has said, does concern me very significantly. The photograph Mr. McBride showed of the site shows an arable field. That means that you're going to have to bring an awful lot of very large, very big, very powerful kit in through the unimproved road in order to start the process of winning and working. And I rather suggest that once you've brought that kit in, either, well, you aren't going to just leave it sitting around doing nothing in a field because the capital cost is going to be very substantial. You either then have to take it out again on exactly the same roads, or you continue with the process. We've had no good reason put to us why the improvements which this committee mandated have not been carried out. I hear what Mr. McBride says when he uses the word technical. I have to say that with every respect to our officers, I consider this as slightly more than technical. So I'm not minded to go with the recommendation before us. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Vice Chairman Charlotte Vernon next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to start, before I actually make my comments, on clarifying, just for the benefit of speakers this morning, that I come into every planning meeting with an open mind. The officer recommendation is exactly that, a recommendation, not an instruction, and I consider every application that we look at thoroughly and make decisions based on information in the report and on our debates as a committee. So moving on from that, this is not my division, but is one I know very well. I travel the road probably 3 or 4 times a week at least, and I wholeheartedly agree with the comments that have been made. The road improvements and access were, as Councillor Ashton noted, considered an essential part of the application, and I don't like the idea of anybody being able to pick and choose which parts of an application they can do and which parts of a condition they can follow and which they can't. I think, as others have alluded to, this leads scope to the road being utilised, shall we say, sort of unlawfully. And I think if we are minded to approve, which it doesn't sound from our debate so far as if we are, we need to have a very firm assurance that if this is approved, we would seek to take enforcement action immediately if any minerals are found to have been exported from the site prior to any improvements to the road network. However, I actually personally think these improvements to the road network and the access need to take place before the application is sort of considered. And if not meeting a 3-year limit to start is not going to happen, that's not really our concern. And I think they have to go again with another application. Thank you.
So in the spirit of things, 2 speakers at a time. Mr. McBride, any comments?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'll move to Councillor Skinner next then, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Most things have been said, but I wholeheartedly stay with the refusal on this because there's loads of other work on water management, groundwater schemes that haven't been done either in the 3 years' time. So the thought of them actually, I think we very much need to stick to our guns and refuse it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Smith next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I am, like colleagues, very much of the view that this application should be refused for reasons that have already been articulated, especially in the sense of working a site, that is exceedingly vague in terms of a condition, because what one considered was working, one would consider excessive. Also, when we were on the site visit, Chairman, and I remember it very well because I think it was my first one of this committee, that measurement was for 2 standard HGVs. That was not with anything on the back of it. That was not with the huge machine that you're going to need to build a road or to move in a field. You will not be able to get 2 HGVs past. We already know you can't get 2 HGVs past, Chairman, without anything on the back of it being an abnormal load, which is difficult throughout the county generally. I do have a question for Mr McBride out of curiosity, because in the report it mentions the fact that if their condition was granted, there wouldn't be much difference in movements between current agricultural vehicles and the vehicles that were on that are proposed to be allowed to move should the condition be granted. My question is, what would the difference be, but also how could you compare the two, because they are exceedingly different in nature, in times of movement and in size, and why they're moving. So I fail to see plainly how that is a basis for grant of condition. As has already been said, Chairman, I think the applicant has had plenty of time, and we are not saying that should an application come back, that previous weighing up situations and assessments would be necessarily different. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is you've had 3 years to fulfil a condition that was deemed required. You haven't. The consequence is you have to start the process again. And I'm also very concerned, Chairman, that suddenly our officers at the time who agreed the condition was needed are now saying you can carry on and then you can do it later. I fail to see what's changed, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We haven't got any specific details of the traffic numbers which would be required to, I suppose, set up the operations to enable the winning and working of minerals to take place. It could be as few as sort of maybe double figures in terms of the machinery that might be necessary to enable that work to take place. Or it could be, a greater number than that. I do obviously hear the committee's concern that that the nature of this operation to sort of implement the permission might only need a small number of vehicle movements to bring the machinery in, but it could also, be obviously without any controls in place, then there could be a greater number than that. I think the point that was being made is that in this area there is a lot of agricultural machinery that's moved around on a regular basis, and from a highway standpoint, in terms of having to look whether what would be needed to facilitate the winning and working of minerals and the number of vehicle movements, that won't be a huge number. It won't be significant in highway terms, and I think that's the basis why highways have come back and said that they're not overly concerned with those initial vehicle movements. But obviously I hear what the committee have said with regard to that.
Thank you. We've had a fairly good round of speakers there and comments, but I've got 2 people that wish to come back, and I'll just wait and see what they have to say. Councillor Reid, followed by Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you. Firstly, it's a point of information. In the discussions that we did have and the presentations that were put to us before these conditions actually agreed to the 6 metres, there was a proposal put forward that the road needed to be 6.5 metres, and we agreed to 6 metres. And I can see from the nods around that everybody remembers that. In regard to the explanation that our very professional officers given to us, any movement at all is potential for another accident. We've listened again today to 4 more accidents that have apparently happened very recently, so it doesn't alter my mind in any event. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you. As seconding the motion, I think I should come back on the issue. Whilst I recognise that we're being told that the highways haven't raised any objections. There are no figures here. I think you're referring to paragraph 31 on page 68, which is about the comments about the movements. It's not backed by any substantial data that we can identify and say, yes, we can see it's only going to be one vehicle a month or whatever. And nor have we got the data that you're comparing it with for the farm. So whilst I respect what you're saying, and it might be, and I'm sure it's fine to say, but actually I feel that we would need some substantial data to back up that statement. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't know, Mr McBride, there's nothing for you to comment there. So I am going to now put it to the vote, and it is proposed by Councillor Ashton, seconded by Councillor Mrs Overton, that the application is refused. Is there any detail you'd like to put to that at all?
I'm very happy just to reconfirm some of the key points that I've already made. We have a 3-year limit on planning permissions in order to encourage development, prevent speculation, prevent land banking. There has been sufficient time on this existing permission in order to carry out the condition that this committee insisted upon 3 years ago, which was to ensure that the highways improvement works identified as necessary to support the development are carried out so as to allow quarry traffic to safely pass on the public highway. We have heard that there will be vehicle movement associated with any start to the winning of materials, even if those materials are stored on site and are not exported. So on that basis, it is, I would say it is certainly my view, and I hope the view of the committee, that that condition is still necessary in order to make the original permission acceptable.
Okay, so that's the proposal. Councillor Mrs Overton, you're happy to second that still?
Agreed.
Okay. Councillor Mr McBride, are you? Councillor Mr McBride, are you? I'm promoting you. Mr McBride, are you happy with those reasons for refusal?
Thank you for promotion, Chairman. But in terms of, I think it would be helpful, perhaps if those reasons can be applied to some planning policy to sort of justify the reasons for, well, to I suppose give the further justification. So I hear the sort of the reasons for the resolution, but it's just to apply those to the relevant policies so that we can complete the complete the wording. I think the other thing I'd just like to say at this stage, Chairman, and it might be that legal might need to help with this as well, is that normally we would bring back the reasons to refusal to a future committee, and that future committee won't now be until the 9th of June at the earliest, and whether there is any sort of possibility that once we've written as officers, listening to the debate and put those reasons into planning sort of technical wording, whether that is agreed with you rather than coming back to the committee. It's just a sort of suggestion, but I don't know whether what the thought of that is, rather than waiting obviously until June and obviously potentially a different committee at that time as well.
Or indeed if it could be signed off by the chairman in the interim period before the end of the year. So that's another way of doing it. Councillor Carrington.
Yes, I just on a point of information, Chairman, I hear what Mr McBride says about policies, and those are of course very important. However, I would gently remind him that as quoted in our report, the reason for the condition does not refer to any policies whatsoever. It states circumstances. I don't know whether if it's been only partially quoted in the report. I hope that's not the case, because it should have been fully quoted. I'm sure we could go away and think of policies, but I think to ask the Committee for Policies on the fly when they have not been included in the condition is a little harsh.
I think it's just trying to sort of make sure that we're all clear as to, obviously, the reasons for refusal. Is it related to sort of highway safety related issues? And if so, there is obviously a policy in the Minerals Local Plan that deals with highway safety. So that would be one policy that we could quote in the refusal reason. I suppose the other sort of reason that I'm hearing is, I suppose, to do with sort of certainty, and that obviously time limit conditions are put on to basically to make sure that things do happen within a reasonable period of time. And again, whether there's a policy which we can connect that reason to basically to justify that. That's maybe something that we can take away as officers to look at, but it was just to give the committee the opportunity to say if they felt that there was particular policies that they wanted to refer to, then to make sure that was captured at this time.
Thank you. Right, so I've got a lot of people coming back, and we're going to go round in circles a little bit. I'm going to go to Councillor Ashton, Councillor Mrs Overton, Councillor Smith. I'm then going to ask legal what their opinion is, because Mr McBride's asking, and then I intend to put it to a vote unless everybody's going to fall out over it. So, Councillor Ashton first.
Thank you. I think Mr McBride there has just captured very beautifully the very policies which I was envisaging citing for the argument that I and others have just collectively made. On that basis, I would be happy to include in my motion to refuse the necessary delegation to yourself, Mr Chairman, to finalise the reason for refusal as necessary, given the time frame between now and the end of the civic year.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Overton.
Thank you. I'm very happy with that. So we're doing authority to deal in conjunction with the chairman, based on the grounds that we've discussed, such as highway safety, time limits, and the traffic, the data for the traffic that's proposed. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Not an issue with that proposed, Chairman, but it may help. I just had a quick scan through, and DM14 springs to mind. Which is obviously around the highway network is of or will be made up to an appropriate standard for the use of the traffic generated by the development, and arrangement for site access and the traffic generated by the development would not have an unacceptable impact on highway safety, free flow of traffic, residential amenity or environment. That's just one policy, Chairman, just for your consideration, because I'm very happy with the proposal.
Legal, please. Any comments at all?
It's up to this committee as to how much weight is to given to specific matters. It's quite clear that the situation has been debated quite well, and the reason for refusal is quite solid. I can understand what Mr McBride is saying, and how beefing it out with some additional policies would be helpful, but as it currently stands, the reason to refuse would be a solid one.
Okay, so is everybody happy with where we stand before I put it to the vote? I will give it a pause because we've had a lot of speakers there and a lot of information has gone backwards and forwards. So we're quite clear with the fact that it will go for refusal based upon Councillor Ashton's previous comments and Councillor Smith's added DM14, in which I can see Councillor Ashton is nodding a positive on that as an addition. Councillor Mrs Overton, you're happy with that, of course? Yes, excellent. So I am therefore going to put it to the vote that it is refused on those items. All in favour, please show now. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Interesting debate, but worthwhile. So we'll move next to the next application, which is 5.2. Which is way over in Holbeach Herne. So, Mr McBride, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this takes us to Holbeach Herne, and the application is sought by Midwest Polychem for outdoor storage of materials, additional building and structures, and external generators, which is retrospective at Laurel Lodge Farm, Herne Road, Holbeach Herne. You'll see the report sets out the background to this application, that planning permission was granted in November 2021 to change the use of existing buildings to a plastic processing facility and to construct 3 additional buildings. As a result of an allegation of unauthorised development and being undertaken at the site, and following a site visit by compliance officers to confirm that actually those buildings and other operations were taking place without the benefit of planning permission, the applicant has sought retrospectively planning approval to regulise those current unauthorised operations. So I'll just go to the presentation to take you through the slides to give you a bit further background to this application. So first slide just puts to show where we're situated. So the site is just off the A17 to the east of Holbeach. Next slide, please. This slide sets out the existing site, and the areas that are outlined in red are those that are captured by this application. So those are the activities that don't currently have planning permission, and that's what this application is seeking to resolve. Next slide, please. So just a few photographs to give you some context. This is looking at the access point into the site off the road. You can see it's not off the A17, it's off a minor road that then leads onto the A17 from probably about, from this point, probably about 400 metres to the south. Next slide, please. This is taken at the southern end of the site, and this is one of the areas which is sought for planning consent. So the area, you can just see over the fence some white bags, which are the storage in storing the recycled products, and this is an area that currently doesn't have planning permission. So this is one of the areas where permission is sought for. Next slide, please. This is at the other end of the site, and again, it's just to give you an overview of the site area. The white Portakabin building in the foreground there, that is one of the buildings, again, which is doesn't currently have planning permission. It's the security cabin, and you'll see a closer-up of that building in one of the next slides. Can you move on, please? And this is that slide. So this is a close-up of the safety office currently on the site. Next slide. And this is a slide actually within the site showing the area which is used for the storage of the finished product. And obviously one of the earlier slides you saw it from outside of the site. Next slide, please. This is the extension to the boiler room that's been undertaken. Next slide. And again, some concrete bunkers that have been constructed to assist with the storage of the finished product. Next slide, please. So that concludes the slides. So if I bring you back to the report, the report sets out the information that's been submitted with the application, and you'll see on page 90 that there has been some inconsistencies with some of the information that's been submitted compared to what's actually on site. So that has caused some issues with being able to assess and to, I suppose, effectively control any development that might be granted if this permission this application is granted permission. Moving on to page 92. At the top of the page, you'll see that paragraph 20 sets out that a flood risk assessment has been submitted with the application, and obviously that is a consideration further on into the report, but just to draw your attention to that. And then moving through the report, if I can draw your attention on page 99 to the results of consultation and publicity. Paragraph 25 there sets out, and you'll see that for quite a number of the consultation responses, we haven't had any objection being raised, including that of the Environment Agency. However, at the bottom of the page, the Highway and Lead Local Flood Authority has requested further information regarding the drainage strategy, and at the bottom of the page there you'll see that South Holland Internal Drainage Board have raised an objection to the application because of their concerns about surface water drainage and the fact that the information that the Drainage Board feel that they need hasn't so far been provided, and therefore they've objected to the application. Moving on then in terms of bringing the report to the conclusions, which start on page 100. I think the crux to this, the assessment of this application is really set out on page 101 in terms of the paragraphs 32 and 33, which deal with the flood risk assessment and the outstanding information that's been required in terms of further information to support the flood risk assessment. So you'll see there that a flood risk assessment has been provided, but it was submitted in relation, or the information that was submitted in that flood risk assessment is based on a different application to what's before the committee today. And officers have worked with the applicant to basically try and get the necessary information that would be needed so the flood risk assessment would be related to this application rather than a previous one that had been withdrawn in the past. And you'll see a bit more detail in paragraph 33 as to why the Drainage Board have objected to the information that has been provided to date. They've got concerns about the potential for treated water and how that would be disposed of. And to try and resolve that, communication had been made with the applicant in January to get further information, but this has still not been forthcoming. So with that in mind, and also on page 102 at the bottom there, the difficulty that we have with the information that has been provided in relation to some of the buildings and structures not being sort of accurate, and how then if permission is granted, then if there was further issues with enforcement, then how you would monitor against inaccurate plans would be of concern to the Waste Planning Authority. So with all that taken into account, the recommendation on page 104 is that the plan application be refused, subject to the 3 reasons set out in the report.
Thank you, Mr McBride. So we have no speakers to this application, so therefore open to committee. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your introduction to this. This report appears to be full of inconsistencies and utterly lacking in detail. Para 6, no details recite. Para 7, inconsistencies with plans submitted and inconsistencies with those submitted. 8, no details submitted. 10, lack of detail, more inconsistencies. 11, no details. 12, no details. 92, no drainage statutory. I could go on, but I don't really feel there's any need to, and I'd like to move refusal in accordance with the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Carrington.
Yes, thank you very much. Follow that. I'm really saddened by this case, actually, because economic development across the whole of Lincolnshire is really important. Economic development in rural parts of our county, which is a very rural county, faces particular challenges. The National Planning Policy Framework gives us scope to get around many of those challenges. It's what we want to see. it is particularly unfortunate that in this case, we're now in March, we've been trying to get those additional details, which Councillor Vernon has summarised so dramatically, since the very, very beginning of January, and they're not there. I completely agree, and I'm happy to second Councillor Vernon's motion that we accept the officer recommendation, but it is a matter of great sadness. Economic development is really, really important. These are not terribly difficult things to achieve. A drainage strategy which meets the requirements of the IDB, we do those every day of the week. We get the details of the buildings right every day of the week. So I'm saddened to second it, because economic development is very important, but happy to second that.
Thank you. I think it's all been said in those two previous speakers, proposed by Councillor Vernon, seconded by Councillor Carrington. Refusal of the application is taken forwards. All in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. 5.3 has been withdrawn. Mr McBride, any comments?
No, Chairman, just to say that we were notified by the applicant this morning at 8:45 that they wished for the applications to be withdrawn. Obviously communicated that to you. I think it's ultimately a decision for the committee. If they're happy that the applications are withdrawn, then there doesn't need to be any further action on this on those two items.
Thank you. So therefore we'll move on to 6.1, and I have a little statement to read. Members of the committee have been made aware of the following when the supplemental report was dispatched last Wednesday. For the public, the report title of this item does not match the agenda title as published. The report title, which states about a 400 kV under cable corridor, is the correct title. This does not affect the material considerations of being decided, and I believe that's just an administrative comment from when the report was being put together. But having said all that, good morning, Justine. Welcome to the committee, and I believe you're going to present the application.
Yes, good morning, Chairman, and thank you, and good morning, members of the committee. This agenda item relates to an application that's been made by Springwell Energy Farm Limited to the Secretary of State for a 40-year development consent order for the construction and operation of a solar energy park on land in the district of North Kesteven. The Council is a consultee in the development consent order process and is required to provide its comments on the application to an examining authority appointed by the Secretary of State, who will, following a 6-month examination, make a recommendation as to whether the development consent order should be granted or not. The Council is not the determining authority for this proposal. The report under consideration, which is Appendix B of the committee report, sets out the comments proposed to be made by the Council to the examining authority on the likely impacts of the development in a local impact report. It has been necessary to bring this report to committee today as the deadline for submission to the examining authority is expected to fall sometime during May this year. And the next available meeting thereafter of this committee would be the 9th of June after the council elections, which would potentially mean that the submission deadline could be missed. Whilst we are requesting approval of the local impact report for submission from members today, you'll note at paragraph 31 of the committee report that it is the intention to bring a further report to this committee on the 9th of June with the final local impact report that has been submitted to the examining authority, alongside a recommendation for written comments that the council should submit in the respect of this application. Members will be familiar from previous development consent order applications that have been considered that there are usually two parts of the recommendation, the second being for the written comments that we would recommend be submitted. Moving on to the presentation, if I could have the first slide, please. Thank you. The Springwell Development Site is proposed to be located on predominantly agricultural land lying to the east and west of the A15, south of Lincoln and to the north of Sleaford. The whole site would cover approximately 1,280 hectares of land. All of this land falls within Lincolnshire County Council's and North Stevens administrative boundaries. The plan on the slide shows the full extent of the order limits that have been submitted with the Development Consent Order application to the Planning Inspectorate. Next slide, please. The site has three distinct areas known as Springwell East, Springwell Central and Springwell West, which are shown on the map on the slide. Springwell East is bordered by the village of Scotwick to the south, Kirby Green to the southeast and Blankley to the north. Springwell Central lies at the heart of the site to the east of RAF Digby, and Springwell West is intersected by the A15 Sleaford Road running north to south through the site. Key features of the site include its location within the southern Lincolnshire Edge National Landscape Character Area, which is defined by the limestone cliff to the west of the site and the dip slope that drops gently away to the edge of the fens in the east. The land is predominantly Grade 3A and Grade 3B agricultural land, and together with some areas of Grade 2 land, the site overall has been assessed of comprising of 42% best and most versatile agricultural land. Of this amount, 591 hectares, equating to 35.6% of best and most versatile land, is proposed underneath solar panels, and other infrastructure would occupy a further 129 hectares of land. The site itself doesn't contain any statutory landscape or ecological designations, the closest being Metheringham Heath Quarry SSSI site, which is 2 kilometres north. There are a significant number of heritage assets comprising of conservation areas, Grade 1, Grade 2, Grade Star listed buildings, and non-designated heritage assets within the wider study area around this site. Blankley Conservation Area is immediately to the north of Springwell East, and Scotwick Conservation Area immediately to the south. Most of this site does fall within a mineral safeguarding area for limestone, as identified in the current Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Local Plan. There's also an extensive public right-of-way network linking to surrounding settlements. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. This next plan shows the proposed locations for specific elements of the development. It would consist of solar photovoltaic electricity generating areas, a substation, a battery energy storage facility, BESS for short, and a 400 kV cable route corridor to connect the development to a proposed new national grid substation near Navenby and other associated infrastructure. The development is expected to be able to generate 800 megawatts of electrical output per year to the grid and would have an anticipated operational life of 40 years, following which it would be decommissioned. The ground-mounted solar PV areas are shown in yellow on the plan. These areas would comprise of solar PV modules fixed to a mounting structure, 3 metres in height, except in areas of flood risk in parts of Springwell East, where they would be up to 3.5 metres in height. The posts would be secured into the ground to a depth of between 1.5 and 3 metres using driven or screw-type piles, or they could have concrete footings in some areas, depending on the ground conditions. Whilst dependent on the technology that will be available at the time that the development would go ahead, subject to getting consent, the application assumes that 1.5 million solar PV modules would be required in order to generate 800 megawatts of capacity. Other infrastructure in these areas would include inverters, combiner boxes, transformers and switchgear, which would be required to manage the electricity generated by the solar PV modules in these areas, and there would also be satellite collector compounds to manage the cabling. The lighter grey shaded areas on the plan here are the areas where the cables would be located. If I could have the next slide, please. This next slide just shows some typical examples of solar PV panels and their mounting structures, and some examples of additional infrastructure that I've just referred to that would be needed in the generating areas. Just on the bottom left slide there's an example of a switchgear, a transformer and a central inverter, and this picture on the right is a typical inverter transformer station. If I could have the next slide, please. This slide just shows the grid connection route and the substation and BESS area in a little bit more detail. The grid connection infrastructure is the area in pink. The Springwell substation, which would include the main collector compound, which manages all of the cabling, is shown in red, and it would have a footprint of approximately 6 hectares. The substation is located adjacent to the BESS, shown in blue, and the BESS area would have a footprint of approximately 12.5 hectares. The substation and BESS are illustrated on the drawing on the bottom right hand of the side. You can see their co-located position in the site. The Springwell substation would facilitate the export of electricity to the grid. Just a point of note, this is a separate substation to the National Grid proposed Navenby substation, which I'll come on to. The BESS facility would store the excess electricity in batteries and dispatch to the grid when required, and typically would comprise of containerised sized units that house the batteries and associated equipment. The BESS is designed to provide peak generation and grid balancing services. As I've just mentioned, it's proposed to connect to the grid via a 400 kV underground cable along a linear route to the west of the A15, which is the corridor shown in pink on the plan here, to the new proposed National Grid substation, which would be located on land north of Heath Lane in Navenby, approximately 1.4 kilometres from the village of Navenby, and this is shown in grey on the top right-hand corner of the slide. The Navenby substation will be built, owned and operated by National Grid Energy Transmission, and it's separate to the Springwell proposal. This substation does not form part of the DCO application and will be subject to consent through an application under the Town and Country Planning Act regime, which is intended to be submitted to North Kesteven District Council in due course. Can I have the next slide, please? This slide just shows an example of what a BESS compound might look like. That's the bottom left-hand corner one. The top one shows a BESS compound under construction. The next slide, please. This final plan shows areas proposed for green infrastructure, indicated in green. The proposed habitat creation includes the creation of grassland, open fields and margins with wildflower, hedgerows and tree belts. Approximately 16 hectares of structural tree planting and approximately 15,500 linear metres of structural hedge planting is proposed, and this includes some mitigating planting along the A15 to fill in gaps to reduce glint and glare. The proposals would retain existing hedgerow, woodland, ditches, ponds, fields and field margins within the order limits, with the exception of some small breaks to create crossings for new access tracks, security fencing, cable routes and new access junctions. Public rights of way that cross the site would also be retained and would be incorporated within multifunctional green corridors, although some would need to be closed or diverted during the construction phase for an anticipated 6 months. The proposals include 3 new public rights of way and 4 new permissive paths to be created, and further details of these are set out in Chapter 12 of the Local Impact Report. And the final point on this slide, the pink dots on this plan identify proposed access points into the site. So that concludes the slide presentation, and I'd just like to take a few minutes just to turn to the local impact report and the impacts of the development. The topic areas that have been considered in the local impact report are set out from section 7. The issues considered are not exhaustive, but consider those impacts where the council has expertise or an interest. The potential impacts have been assessed against national planning policies and local development plan policies. The local impact report identifies positive, neutral and negative effects that could arise as a result of this development at this stage. It should be noted that the national planning policy, as set out in the overarching National Policy Statement for Energy, EM1, does consider this type of development as critical national priority infrastructure. In principle, this development could help meet targets for reducing carbon emissions and would offer significant positive impacts in terms of the transition and movement towards net zero. As such, it is considered to accord with EM1 and with the sustainable development objectives contained in the National Planning Policy Framework and in local plan policies. There is also potential for this proposal to deliver biodiversity net gain, improvements to public rights of way, which we have just mentioned, and some socio-economic benefits. The positive benefits, however, would need to be balanced by the examining authority against any potential negative effects. The local impact report sets out the likely issues and impacts that may arise from construction, operation and decommissioning of the development. Whilst I don't propose to go through all the issues set out in the local impact report in detail, as members will already be aware of them from having seen the report, but I would like just to highlight a few that are currently considered to be most significant in terms of their potential for negative effects. Firstly, the local impact report raises concern about the certainty of grid connection and timings for this in relation to the Springwell project, as no existing grid connection infrastructure is available to them, and the project relies on a connection to the proposed new Navenby substation, which does not yet benefit from planning permission and is some years away from being able to be completed. Clarity is therefore sought on how the two projects would align, and a mechanism through the development consent order, if should it be granted, to restrict the commencement of the Springwell development until such time that the Navenby substation has commenced. Turning to landscape and visual, AAH landscape consultants have been engaged and have reviewed the application on behalf of the council, and their full comments are appended to the local impact report. It is considered that by reasons of its mass and scale, that the development would lead to significant adverse effects on landscape character and on visual amenity during all phases of the development. The development has the potential to transform the local landscape by altering its character on a large scale, and has the potential to affect the wider landscape character at a regional scale. This is through replacing large areas of agricultural and rural land with solar development, affecting the current openness, tranquility and agricultural character that are identified as defining the characteristics of this area. The scale and extent of the development would also lead to significant adverse effects on views from receptors by altering views within an agricultural rural landscape to that of a landscape with large solar development. The cumulative landscape and visual effects of this development with other large projects that are proposed also have the potential to bring about significant landscape and visual effects. In terms of traffic and transport, the Highway Authority are satisfied with the assessment that has been undertaken. However, mitigation measures are considered to be necessary. These measures include junction improvements, and these are set out in more detail in Chapter 11 of the Local Impact Report. You will note that, however, that the Highway Authority are recommending that there are additional measures required, and this potentially could be in the form of a contribution to further future highway improvements in respect of the junction at the A15B1202, which has been identified as being overcapacity and having an existing accident problem. Overall, subject to these mitigation measures being secured, the traffic and transport impacts during the construction phase are considered to be negative, but not severe in the context of national planning policy. Further details will need to be submitted for highways approval. There are significant concerns in the local impact report about the assessment of cultural heritage for both buried and above ground heritage. The assessment of built heritage and setting currently lacks key details and evidence to support the scoping decisions that have been made, which has resulted in the exclusion of nearly all listed buildings within the 1 kilometre study area and the scoping out of the Scotwick, Blankney and Metheringham conservation areas from the assessment, and fails to address concerns raised by council officers to date. Serious concerns are raised in the report regarding the assessment of archaeology and the adequacy of work undertaken to date, which is considered to fall considerably short of acceptable standards and fails to meet the requirements set out in policy and guidance. A comprehensive assessment of the potential impacts on archaeology and a critique of the applicant's assessment to date is set out in Chapter 14 of the Local Impact Report. The primary concern is the lack of evaluation to identify currently unknown archaeology across the proposed development area. Trial trenching, which is a technique to use this, has currently only been undertaken on slightly over 0.1% of the order limits, meaning 99.9% of the site has not yet been evaluated. As such, there is considerable uncertainty over the extent of buried heritage assets due to the inadequate amount of trial trenching undertaken. Chapter 15 of the report considers the impact of the development on agricultural land. Landscape consultants have been commissioned to review the application, and their report is also appended to the local impact report. There would be a loss of best and most versatile agricultural land with this scheme, which is of concern at district and county level, particularly when considered cumulatively with other large-scale solar schemes in the wider area that have either been granted consent or are currently in the development consent order process. As previously mentioned, 42% of the site has been assessed as BMV land. Of this, 35.6% would be under the solar panels. Other built infrastructure would also take a further 129 hectares of land, 77 of which would represent a permanent loss. This loss of BMV land is currently considered to be contrary to national planning policy and also to local development plan policy. Whilst it's argued that the loss of BMV land under solar panels is considered temporary, 40 years is a long period of time. Productive farmland would be removed and be replaced with lower intensity grass-based system. This loss of arable production is considered to be significant at a local level. The impact of this development on minerals is also a concern. Most of the solar farm would be located within the limestone mineral safeguarding area, as previously mentioned, and there is therefore potential for mineral sterilisation and for impacts on the quarries that are immediately adjacent to this site. At this time, it's not considered that this has been adequately demonstrated that the proposals would accord with the mineral safeguarding policies within the Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Local Plan. There are also concerns regarding the generation of waste and the cumulative impacts of this, combined with multiple large-scale solar farms that have either now been consented or are planned in Lincolnshire. With no current facilities within the UK to recycle solar PV panels, this is a growing concern for the council. Not only considering decommissioning, but also from the replacement of panels that might be needed within the development's lifetime. And this has the potential to become a serious issue. Finally, one further comment in terms of public health before I move on to the final point. The council does remain disappointed that public health was scoped out of the environmental impact as a separate topic chapter. It's included within the other chapters, and no health impact assessment has been undertaken, and that was a scoping decision made earlier in the pre-application process and endorsed by the Planning Inspectorate. There are concerns in the local impact report as to how public health assessments have been undertaken. And one aspect is the mental health of the communities and how they may be affected by this type of development, and those concerns, in addition to others, are set out in the report. Finally, the local impact report highlights concerns about the cumulative effects particularly in respect of the affected communities, landscape and visual impacts, traffic and transport, the impact on agricultural land, heritage and waste, as we've already referred to. There is the potential for significant inter-project effects to arise from this development in combination with other developments. Members will be familiar with the other solar schemes that have come in front of this committee and the cluster that formed around the Gainsborough area. With this development here in North Clesteven, there are other solar schemes that are coming forward that will also be seeking to connect to the new Navenby substation, and namely two of those are Fosgreen and Leoda solar schemes, which some of you may already be familiar with. As a result of this, there is a potential for a new cluster of solar developments to form in this area of Lincolnshire as well, centred around the Navenby, proposed Navenby substation. The local impact report therefore makes a recommendation to the examining authority that an interrelationship report should be required for these schemes as well, similar to what was produced for those in the Gainsborough area. So that concludes my summary of the local impact report, and turning to the recommendation. The recommendation to this committee today is therefore to approve the submission of a local impact report to the examining authority that's substantially in accordance with the draft local impact report at Appendix B. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, all I can say is congratulations. You've got to the end of that. I bet you're quite pleased.
It was a big report to summarise, Chairman.
Absolutely. An awful lot of facts, an awful lot of information, and I'd just like to say a quick thank you with regard to how you've presented it, because it's been clear and concise. So we'll just start off with that as a starting point. Yes, this application is an NSIP, so I'll just remind committee we are not taking a decision on this. We are just making our comments known, and they will go to another place for them to take a decision. Unfortunately, another place tends to go off and make their judgments, whether or not they listen to what we have to say or not. And that's unfortunate, because here in Lincolnshire we are industrialising a lot of the landscape with regard to these applications, and yet again we see a connection to the grid which might or might not exist at some point in the future, but it is somewhat remote from where the site is. And if you take into account the resistance of the cables and the loss of power between the panels and where they could enter the grid, or indeed with any battery storage, whether the battery storage is allowing things to go backwards and forwards and be supported is another issue. I note the comments with regard to the battery management plan under paragraph 20. So I have grievances with regard to it, and I'm very pleased that your comments have been constructive in that, and fair with regard to where things are positive, but predominantly most things are negative within this report, and it's just unfortunate. So all I'm hoping is that somebody somewhere will listen to the comments and take forward the recommendations from it. Councillor Ashton, you've indicated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd first begin by extending my own thanks for such a comprehensive report covering in incredible detail many of the aspects which will be a concern to me, and I'm sure other members too. And similarly, I very much regret that we're not the decision maker on this. I regret that we are not given that responsibility for taking this kind of decision over an issue which is very clearly a significant impact on the landscape and on the amenity on the population of Lincolnshire. My own concerns, are that we talk of a 40-year temporary permission. I don't feel there's an awful lot temporary about a 40-year permission. And my mind is taken to certain industrial sites in Lincolnshire where an undertaking, a condition was imposed on the original site that it would be returned to agricultural land. A condition which 40 or 50 years hence isn't worth the paper it's written on, because the way that planning and planning policy and planning has developed over the period of time is that a site that has had 40 years of non-agricultural use, I would say good luck stacking up the argument that it's still an agricultural field when the application comes forward in 40 years' time to either sustain it for this purpose or indeed do something else non-agricultural with it. I have grave concern for the impact of this particular application on the national landscape, on the rolling heathland extending as this does between Blankney and the A15, both sides of the A15. A really important view for people coming up to Lincolnshire, travelling through Lincolnshire on their way to visit Lincoln. What you currently see are those beautiful rolling fields. Now, fair enough, you can hide solar panels behind hedges, but you certainly won't be seeing beautiful rolling fields coming up the A15 with this either side of it. And isn't it nice how they called Springwell? It envisages sort of nice and wonderful things. It doesn't necessarily envisage 3,162 acres, because let's do talk in acres. I know these people like to talk in hectares. I couldn't tell you what a hectare looks like, but I know I know what a field of 1 acre, 3 roods and a perch looks like, because I'm paying rent on it at Wrangle. We talk in these in acres, and I think it's better to characterise it that way. But genuinely, beyond those concerns as to the impact on amenity, the impact on landscape, which in my mind, are the most significant reasons to object to this thing. I am alarmed that on page 75 of our papers, page 62 of that section of the report, at 20.4, it says no specific chapter is dedicated to the impact of fire risk. And we're talking about battery energy storage systems, which aren't immune from going up like a Roman candle. And in the event that they do, I'm not seeing any evidence that thought has been given to where is the water supply for cooling should one of these things go up. And I think if I'm right in understanding, should a battery storage site catch fire, you can't put it out, you've got to wait for it to burn out, but you need significant amounts of water once the fire has gone out to cool it down. I don't know where that water is going to come from here, because this is a pretty dry bit of Lincolnshire. Neither do I see any thought having been given to what interception is being put on the drainage systems to intercept that suppression agent once it's been sprayed on a burnt out, hopefully cooling down battery storage. Once that's run off, where's it going? Is it going into our drainage systems, our water courses, ultimately into the Witham, and right the way down through the area that I represent to Boston? So I appreciate this is emerging technology, but it's not that emerging that thought hasn't been given in the United States and across the world to what is the basic requirement to manage the fire risk of a battery energy storage system. And the fact that it isn't evident here that that work has been done really, really does frighten me. And I very much hope that the Secretary of State will take our points on board and refuse this application, because I would have a certain degree of confidence on the remarks that I've just made that if this application was before the committee for decision, I would be moving refusal on that basis, and I think we could stack up a credible argument for doing so.
Thank you. Councillor Carrington.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd endorse everything that Tom just said. I think just procedurally I should begin by declaring not so much an interest, but the proponents of this scheme did come to do a pre-application presentation to North Kesteven members. Being a member of North Kesteven, I did attend that. And can I second yours and Tom's thanks to the officer team for the incredible thoroughness of this report. These applications are phenomenally complicated. We've learned that because we now have so many of them that come from time to time before this committee. And this report is an absolute exemplar of thoroughness. Chairman, there are so many aspects, but I'm just going to pick a few out if I may. The first thing is to say, yes, we need renewables. We really do need renewables, and we need secure domestic supplies of energy. But those needs must be balanced by having that generation capacity in the right form and in the right place. And fundamentally, that's what the issues around this application are all about. I'd like to start, if I may, where Justine ended, and that's with the issue of cumulative impact. I was privileged last year to do some work with the MP who covers this area, which is Dr. Caroline Johnson, who obtained not one but two Westminster debates on solar. And the key thrust that came out of those concerned cumulative impact and loss of agricultural land. And indeed, last April, I think it was, we had a written ministerial statement from the last government which gave ministerial force to ensuring that those were serious considerations taken into account. And that loss of agricultural land is enormously important. It's been referenced in this report. Not all of the land here is best and most valuable, and I know that the applicant, or at least the landowner, has been working hard on establishing the exact classification. But there is a huge amount here and a huge amount in the other solar parks currently proposed, which will be lost effectively to agriculture. Yes, I know you can graze some sheep on it, but this is good arable land. It is productive land. And the amount, although it might technically remain really just to keep the grass down, feeding a few sheep, it is not the same as the agricultural productivity, which is a characteristic of our county. And on that cumulative point, we have 15 NSIP scale solar factories, let's call them, in or straddling the boundaries of Lincolnshire, 5 of those alone now within North Kesteven. And you just think, when is enough enough? Chairman, a couple of other points that I want to pick off. Tom's covered quite a few, but this is a speculative application. There is no grid connection for it. This and other schemes are assuming that one will be provided, but at the moment there is nowhere for the electricity to go. I'm particularly concerned about biodiversity net gain. I note the point very valuably stated in the report before us that this will provide some level of net gain, but it's about half of what has been delivered by other comparably sized NSIP solar factories elsewhere in the county. I'm enormously concerned about heritage. I think there is the potential for enormous damage here. The lack of assessment on heritage, on health, on a range of other issues is really disturbing, because it does not indicate that the material which has been prepared, and that is what will go to the Secretary of State, is remotely thorough enough. Let's remember that number we had at the beginning, more than 1 million solar panels. I could go on, there are other things, but the final point I'd just like to go back to is we don't have any evidence before us as to the exact type of the proposed batteries. Are they lithium ion or lithium iron phosphate? It makes an enormous difference, both in terms of the flood risk, which Councillor Ashton referred to, and the potential for fire and contamination. Let's remember that I think I'm right in saying that under a significant chunk of this land, we have an aquifer. Those with long memories who remember an agricultural scheme about 15 years ago will remember that. So if there's a huge amount of water to put out of a fire, would that then contaminate the aquifer? The bottom line in all of this is that we simply do not have nearly enough information supplied by the proponents of the scheme to properly evaluate it. And those points have been brought out, I think, with tremendous thoroughness in the report that Justine has presented. This scheme would industrialise yet another large piece of Lincolnshire with no local benefits for local communities. So, Chairman, I don't think we've had a proposal yet, but I'm very happy to propose the recommendation on page 5. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Overton next,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you very much. This is adjacent to my area, the substation being in my ward, division and my ward. So I declare an interest in that. I have been looking at this whole issue as an overall policy issue. Obviously, I know we're not making the decision today, but I'm declaring that, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to vote, but I shall be speaking anyway. Does that sound right to you, Rachel? Thank you. Okay, so the key point I think that really worries me, I'm pleased with fellow speakers have covered key points as well. The important point is that if we need renewable energy, it should be produced close to where it's needed. And largely that would be on the commercial roofs where the commercial industry is underneath. You would not then need a great big 32-acre field for a grid connection. And I think it's vital that the electricity is produced where it's needed, on roofs, down the middle of railways, car parks, anywhere close to where it's industry or urban development where it's required. Using up farmland miles from where it's needed is incredibly wasteful, because the electricity has to be lost on the way and we lose the farmland for at least a working lifetime. Where an energy crop is grown, it can be used the next year for wheat, for food again. You've got that flexibility. But here it ties up the land for a working lifetime, which is just not acceptable in itself. But looking at the application, they talk about 1 kilometre, and I just don't think that's anything like enough. The impact of these is much greater than 1 kilometre. And for example, if you did get a battery fire, like the one we saw in California, the plume of smoke that was emitted, which was poisonous, covered a vast area. And many, I think tens of thousands of people had to be evacuated. So only considering 1 kilometre is just ludicrous. It's nothing like the impact, let alone the sense of place. And I guess that's also has a very significant impact, even not just the land that it covers. The point on the battery safety is well made. And I'd like to know how many batteries there are in total, and what are the chances of a fire starting. And I think those two questions together might give us some very significant information. It might be that we've got so many batteries that there's bound to be a fire in the next few years. The point about the water aquifer is really relevant, because if you did have a fire, that would be going down into the aquifer. You know, the poisons that were emitted would be down in the aquifer as well, which would then damage the water for much further afield, and the drinking water and what we need to survive. I think, lastly, just to pick up the issue of the size of this development, 4,200 acres is big, and the cumulative effect with the three that we've got together that were mentioned comes to just under 10,000 acres. That's an area that you could put the whole of the city of Lincoln in that. And the city of Lincoln houses and works 110,000 people. So the same area, the city of Lincoln, they're talking about covering with solar. It's completely wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. As this is an NSIP, I can speak plainly, and boy do I intend to. Here we are again, Chairman. Lincolnshire is under siege, Chairman. I have never seen anything like it. In context, that 40 years is temporary. I will be 70 when that permission ends, Chairman. That's if I live that long, because nobody knows what's around the corner. I will be 70. A lot of people in this room won't be here. That isn't temporary. That's a lifetime. This cannot go on. This government claims to think about food security. It isn't, Chairman. We have 10,000 acres in Gainsborough that have been given consent, that have gutted Gainsborough, that's destroyed its tourism industry and its agriculture. The residents of Lincolnshire are tired of this government treating them with, and this great county, and indeed this council, with utter contempt. The government would do well to remember we are the nation's breadbasket. We do not have enough food to feed ourselves now. The NFU, when the Gainsborough NSIPs were going through this chamber, Chairman, said we make 55% of what we need to survive. What a lot of people don't realise, Chairman, or don't want to admit, we are in a hot war now, as we sit here, in relative peace, but we are in a very dangerous time, Chairman. If that war goes live, and it's very possible with the inflationary comments of the Prime Minister, very willing and cavalier to put British personnel in harm's way, we cannot feed ourselves. We will be back to what it was in the Second World War, and we had less people and we nearly starved, Chairman. Food security is being ignored on the altar of net zero. I have no problem with solar panels on roofs where they belong, not in fields that are great for agriculture, that are the lifeblood of this county, that provide jobs, that provide pretty much everything this county needs. We're very lucky we have these farms, Chairman. Other areas don't. There may come a time, Chairman, where locally they say, well, I can't export to you somewhere else because local people need food and I can get just as much giving food to them. So there may be a very real threat to that, Chairman. In closing, Chairman, the people of Lincolnshire have long memories. We will not forgive, we will not forget what amounts to willful and physical economic destruction of parts of this great county at the hands of this government. And if they've got any sense, Chairman, it will stop. But I don't think it will. I have, unfortunately, unlike Councillor Ashton, I have no faith that this will be given a fair and transparent hearing by the Secretary of State. I think he's already got his rubber stamp out and it's basically stamped, Chairman, unfortunately. But we are where we are because we have no power to stop it, sadly.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I always understood that planning committees were supposed to be objective. In all the planning committees, planning and regulation committee meetings I've been to, every time a renewable application comes up, all the Conservative members and the independent member are against it. There is no objectivity. So I would say it's just as well that the government make the decisions because you know, just hear what this council has been on about. I don't recognise it. This is all about renewable energy. The earth is heating up year on year because of all the carbon, and what we need to do is address that. Lincolnshire should play its part. I don't think there should be solar farms all over Lincolnshire, of course I don't, but we ought to do something. We ought to have our share. And I think the Conservative Party councillors need to remember, when you come to this committee, you've got to be objective. And I hope that happens in the future, because it's certainly not happened today, and it's not happened in the past either. And, you know, there are rules about planning committee that we need to stick to, and we need to generate renewable energy in Lincolnshire.
Well, everyone's entitled to their point of view. Councillor Sear, next, please.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. I listened carefully. We are not decision maker. We know what's going to happen. I agree with my colleague from this side, you know, Tom, but they say farmland going to become solar panel, 40 years, it go back to agriculture. No way. Where my area, that what happening. It never go back after gas terminal. You know what going on there? I don't want to repeat it. It's a shame. We are not decision to, you know, to speak out or make decision not to happen. Of course, we need solar panel, but like I have nothing against that. You can go on top of the building. You have plenty warehouse, big, massive warehouse. But to go on the farmland, where you go food, that not on. You talk about where battery go to go, and I know very well where they go to go because it go to where I live. Because there I have go ahead to do what they call battery storage. That like, is it blue hydrogen? I wasn't quite sure. It's a danger. We have to stood up for what the countryside. You talk about drive on A15, you will see nothing, you will see solar panel, you don't see the field. Same on East Coast. When you come to the seaside, what you going to see in the future? Factory, up, sink, not a paper factory, solar panel, pylon, nuclear waste, carbon capsule, you name it. That's it not on. What's the benefit of this? Don't talk about the job. You talk about 40 years, 100 years, it's no job. The people not from in the area to come and do the job. So it's not on. I quite really, if people not tell the truth, 40 years, go back to agriculture, no way, not in, I see with my own eye, since I be councillor 3.5 years ago, there you go. So you know, no matter which government, which party, but you not tell the truth, you just do it to pass on the paperwork, and you got it after you go back to do something else, not stick with what you say. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just reminiscing a little bit about the many happy hours spent in some of these fields testing agricultural equipment that will not be going on in the future. But back to report, nicely presented, but the decommissioning bit would leave me to worry because there's no reinstatement. We talk about carbon. The big piles of concrete, funny enough, have got quite a high carbon input. So are we just not going to take those in consideration? The fact that the land won't be able to be used as it is now is criminal. It's not just negligent, it's criminal. And we have, this is the thing for generations. We do need renewables. We do need to think where we site them. And this thought that they're all cheap and, you know, it's free, it isn't, because all these renewable projects require a great investment before you get anything out of them. None of this comes forward. The public have to pay up and look cheerful. But as I say, for me, the decommissioning part of this and the reinstatement is less than thin. It's non-existent, I'm afraid. And we really do need to be thinking about that. People have mentioned the energy versus food debate. I would suspect on energy crops, a good third of Lincolnshire already is being used to grow energy crops. So that debate is extremely thin anyway. But the thought of losing good farmland to this, it's really unacceptable. And that's not political. It's absolute stupidity if you want to feed a nation.
Well, we've had quite a few speakers on this, and I've got one more, and then I've got somebody that's indicated they want to come back for seconds. I'm reluctant to allow people to come back for seconds because I think the officers have got a pretty clear view of how the committee feel with regard to the recommendation. I think it's going to be well supported, judging by what I've heard so far. But I'll go to Councillor Ashley Morris, and then I will allow Councillor Ashton to come back.
In which case, I'll be as brief as I can. It's a very simple thing that I want to say. It's got nothing to do with whether we're whichever flavour councillor we are. It's common sense. We're supposed to be the vegetable basket of Britain. We're going to be the microwave of Britain at this rate. And the government's headlong dash, you know, on the back of Mr. Miliband towards some sort of utopia of net zero is unrealistic, I feel, at best. So, I mean, I think perhaps we need another cliche for what Lincolnshire is going to be called, but it certainly won't be a food production area at this rate. Thank you.
Thank you. So, on the basis of what I've heard, I'm going to propose the recommendation for the report. Sorry?
With respect, Chairman, I already did.
And I seconded it.
Thank you. I'll second it then, but I will then allow Councillor Ashton to come back.
I seconded it already.
Thank you. I was just going to offer my services to second it if no one else had, but I do feel it absolutely necessary just to clarify for the record that whilst I do approach decisions in this committee with a clear and open mind, I'm afraid there's very little way that I could ever support measures which sees Lincolnshire being destroyed in this way in order to meet carbon obsessions of a national government. I mean, by all means, if we wish to pursue carbon neutrality, that's a very, very important thing to do. But I'm here to represent Lincolnshire, and it's Lincolnshire I must put first. That's not because I'm a Conservative, that's because I care about this county, and I cannot sit here and support measures that would see that actively harmed to fulfil vague policy objectives that have come up elsewhere.
Right. So, having said all that, I'm now going to close the debate. I'm going to go back to the officers, and I will say plural officers, because just in case Neil might want to throw something into the pot, and just say, is there anything you'd like to come back on with regard to what you've heard this morning?
Yes, please, Mayor Chairman, just a couple of points I think it's just probably worth coming back on, and thank you to members for your comments. Just in terms of the impact on the aquifer, that is a very well raised point. It is an area where we would expect the Environment Agency to exercise their statutory functions in terms of the water environment, and we would certainly defer to them on that particular topic. Just to come back to Councillor Overton's points in terms of the batteries and numbers of batteries, that's not information that's included within DCO applications, and this we find is fairly standard practice for those applications that we've seen so far. The details of the design and the types of equipment in these developments is usually reserved for further approvals under requirements that may be attached to a development consent order. That's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Nothing from Ms. Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm going to put it to the vote. It has been proposed by Councillor Carrington and seconded by Councillor Mrs. Overton that the recommendation as printed is fine by everybody, but obviously the committee's had the opportunity to make their comments with regard to the application. You've heard that there is a need for renewable energies, but in the right place. And I know members of NKDC or North Kessington have commented with regard to NTIPT in their areas. Well, I'll just draw your attention to what's going on in West Lindsey that's been signed off, and other parts of Lincolnshire. There are many projects coming forwards, and it does affect our agricultural landscape. I'm sure a lot of the points that have been made this morning would apply to many of them. But the issue is appropriate development in the right places, producing the right outcomes. So yes, we need the power, but yes, that power needs to be close to where it's being used and not to the detriment of others. Proposed, seconded, all in favour, please show. Those against, please show. So that is one against and everyone else in favour. So thank you very much. Now, before we move away, I'm going to just, because that is the last application of the morning, in a similar format to what I did with the highways officers, I'd like to say thank you. We've just heard an absolutely exemplary effort from Justin with regard to this application, and over the period of the last 3.5, 4 years, we've heard similar things. And do I have to offer you an apology, Mr. McBride, because you've taken a lot of flack from the committee on occasion, and I think that we've all worked very well together. But you know, as far as the quality of the reports that have come through from officers and how you've presented them has been absolutely excellent. So I'd like to say thank you from the committee. And I'd also not like to forget the democratic officers and legal in the middle here, because I'm not sure when if Martha's coming back, but are we that bad? You wanted to come back, but I'm sure that the Democratic and the legal officers have supported as well. So this is the last meeting of the term, I think. So I'd just like to say thank you. Who knows what the next committee will bring? Some members will be coming back. Some members won't. Some members are graciously retiring. Others are going to that wonderful place called the ballot box, and we'll see what the outcome is after that. So thank you all for attending. And
Chairman, if I may, looking around, it's dawned on me that as well as being one of the oldest on the committee, I think I'm one of the longest serving too. As you mentioned, this is the last planning and regulation meeting of the current cycle. I'd just like it to be put on record from the committee to say a heartfelt thank you to you, Chairman, for being a very fair and inclusive chairman, not just to applicants, but to officers, public and committee members too. And you deserve to be sitting in that seat after May. Thank you.
thank you very much. Safe journey home. Meeting closed. Thank you. Good luck to whatever you're doing in the future.